partnership with Lending Hearts, and Vaso Pelaroris is the founder executive director of Lending Hearts and has quite a network of, some very prominent individuals that have been helping us. And one of the roles has been a major requirement of all the residency training programs in the country and with medical education, training physicians around physician wellness and reaching to people of expertise outside of this to also assist us. So I think it's very important that we're excited with that and brought a great speaker today. Well, I'll give a chance to let also kind of share, introduction of the speaker she's brought for us today.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for having us back this last Grand Rounds for the school year. It's been a privilege to be with all of you. At Lending Hearts, it is our mission to provide free emotional, social, and physical support to children and young adults living with cancer. And many of you may or may not know that the term young adult actually goes up to 39, 40 years old. So we have quite a range of ages of those who are living with cancer and their loved ones who are part of our organization. But what's such an important part of helping them through their battle with cancer is finding that the wellness to persevere through managing stress, their nutrition, their movement, all of these different elements. And that's why I feel that we've been able to contribute to these LECOM Grand Rounds on the topic of wellness and bringing this to all of you. And I am super excited for our topic today. Back in 2020, when the world shut down, I, like many individuals, turned to Peloton to help me get through that time and keep my own sanity and manage my health and all of those elements. And here, 5 years later, I'm still at it daily. But over the course of those years, one of my favorite instructors, Matt Wilpers, I don't know if any of you are Peloton junkies like myself and know who Matt is. He formed a subset with our presenter today, Coach John Ferry of Team Wilpers. And it's been, for myself, I am fangirling here, just unbelievably wonderful to have these opportunities to work with these tremendous coaches. I have my own health issues that I battle. I have my own stresses I need to manage. And I am so grateful to Coach John and Coach Matt and the team for what they've been able to deliver to me. And I'm excited to have John speak with all of you today on this topic. So I will turn it over to Coach John Ferry now.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I appreciate everyone, taking time out of their day. I'm excited to share some of my thoughts on certainly a topic that's very personal to me and near and dear to my heart and my family. So just to kind of continue upon what Vaso said already, I'm both the co-founder and head coach of Team Wilpers. And in essence, what we are is a coaching business that's really designed to work and train athletes, primarily focusing in endurance sports in both the areas of running, cycling, and triathlon. Additionally, I'm also the head coach of the Dashing Whippets run team in New York City, which just so happens to be one of New York City's largest run clubs, but also most successful performance-wise. As a matter of fact, we have some women starting in the pro field of the New York City half here in a couple weeks. So really work with all levels. And the thing that I really wanted to discuss today isn't so much just about fitness per se, but really more about things that we can do to establish healthy patterns and choices to allow you to set the baseline for expanding an overall wellness journey over the course of many years. So naturally, we'll delve into that a little bit more. And then if anyone is curious, I would be more than eager to discuss running, training philosophy, workout tactics for hours on end, but we'll save that at least for the end of the group chat here. So I do want to talk a little bit about Team Wilpers and kind of what we are, because I think it will play a lot with what you do and what you're planning to do with your career. So Team Wilpers came into existence because of my relationship with Matt Wilpers, who is still a instructor at Peloton. And why we started Team Wilpers is we saw this kind of gap in the coaching landscape at that time for individuals that were seeking a very high level of coaching and expertise, but for every level of athlete. So certainly no secret, the top performing athletes, professional athletes are getting coaching. And what we had to do, and what we still on a daily basis are trying to let people know, that all athletes deserve coaching. All athletes at all levels can benefit from that level of coaching. So our practice has really been based upon helping the individual athlete achieve their specific goals and providing a very kind of high level of guidance during that process. And the scope of our clients have ranged all the way from first-time runners and athletes that are looking to develop a healthy relationship in sport and try to stay healthy during that process without getting injured, all the way to pro athletes. So we've really seen a span of athletes over what is almost 7 years now that Team Wilpers has been in action. And there are a couple of things that we really pride ourselves on. Number one, and it used to be the thing that I really say we hung our hat on, was frequent communication. And it was a belief between Matt and myself that the ongoing dialogue between athlete and coach was ultimately what set them up to be most successful. So it's a kind of an old sales adage of no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So we're always working towards the individual as opposed to coming in with training philosophy only and applying it to a group. And what we kind of call that would be our athlete first approach. Which, to be quite honest, I didn't come up with. I was on a podcast recently and someone asked me about my athlete first approach, and then I appreciated them for the great name. But so now we have an athlete first approach, which is the thought process that in essence, no two athletes are the same. So what we know is that what works for one athlete is not only not guaranteed to work for another, but it's very unlikely that the exact same training, the exact same stimulus is going to work for one athlete the same way it works for a second, the way it works for a third. So, sometimes I'll refer to the way that we do things as kind of then the hard way. I'll kind of phrase that we're horrible business people, but pretty good coaches at the end of the day, because everything's custom, everything's designed specific to the individual. So it's very time-based. It's very kind of digging into the details to find exactly what we think will be the biggest training impetus for that one individual. And I certainly have to imagine that this is how you're going to be looking at patients here very soon, if not already, that what works for one is different than the other, and you're having to really delve down deep into the personality to find out what's the best way to provide treatment for those people. But certainly, I've spent now the past 7 years of my life full-time coaching, but it's not actually the bulk of my career. The bulk of my career was spent in the entertainment industry, of all places. And I was a longtime stage manager of both Broadway and off-Broadway shows, and spent nearly 2 decades traveling the globe, as far away as China, working on countless productions over the course of time. And most notably, just because when people ask, I spent several years on both the Broadway and North American tour of Mamma Mia. And then the follow-up question to that is always a resounding yes, that I still know every word to every ABBA song, despite trying hard to forget over the course of time. But I think maybe one of these days, possibly. But I bring up my years in the entertainment industry because I think they were very important. One, they were great. I wouldn't trade them for anything, but it's an industry that really does not promote health and wellness within its employees, and especially my trade within it. Characteristics that are associated with that job are incredibly long hours, late nights, weekends, holidays, high stress situations, and a circumstance that you're all, once again, going to be very familiar with very soon, if not already. It makes it more and more difficult to make healthy lifestyle decisions consistently as part of that industry. So as future medical professionals, you already have some serious challenges ahead of you. We talked about, obviously, a difficult schedule. You've got high energy demands. You've got family availability to attend to. You have emotional availability of bringing yourself to work each day, et cetera. And people are ultimately going to ask a lot from you, and you're going to have to deliver. And it's going to be me. I'm going to be there asking a lot. And so as you're considering all the many things that you have to do as the scope of your studies, the scope of your practice, one of the easiest things we tend to do is skip over, what are you doing for yourself? How are you prioritizing yourself? And maybe most importantly, how are you planning to take care of yourself so that you can ultimately be there in the service of others. So I am a runner. That is what I do for myself. Thankfully, it tends to be a relatively healthy habit I picked up, but no one else has to be a runner. So I'm going to try very hard today to try to not convince everyone to pick up a marathon habit that continues for your next 2 decades, because that's not what we're trying to do here, but is what I do. I do like to share that I was not always a runner. I did not feel a primal urge to run. I was not born a genetically gifted runner. I became a runner actually as a result of moving to New York City when I was 21 years old, moving to pursue work on Broadway. When I got here, I would work roughly 60 to 80 hours a week consistently. In doing so, you would think I was made a fortune, but it was just barely getting by. And so I started running because it was really one of the only things I could afford to do. I didn't need any equipment. I didn't need a gym. So I had a halfway decent pair of running shoes, and I would get home from work at a little after midnight. I would change into my running shoes and I would go run laps in what at the time was Astoria Park. Despite being convinced by all my friends that I was bound to be on the next episode of Law and Order, it ended up going okay. Don't worry, where there's a will, there's a way. And I would come home and then go to bed after that. And I did this very unusual schedule, not because it was so super convenient, obviously, but at that kind of early time, my early 20s, I was already sort of starting to clock that since I had left high school, I could feel that my physical fitness was deteriorating, my weight was rising, and ultimately, I did not like those parts of the process. So I'd never been, as I mentioned, a genetically gifted, runner. I was not going to go pursue any sort of like college athletic goals, but I'd been an athletic kid, what I would call like the ball sports, baseball, basketball, football. And I didn't like to feel that I was losing a part of that as I was coming into adulthood. And so I'm sure, as you all have been taught, when you're starting to talk to patients, you look at the family health history in order to determine problems for future generations. And so between my parents, some of my amazing genetics in the family tree are going to include cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, plus a few other really great ones as well. So I really was set up to win the genetic lottery by the genetic kind of down trickle. Not to mention that neither my father nor my grandfather lived to see the age of 70 years old, which is something that I certainly hope to do. But based upon the way things were going at that time, while I was kind of starting to head down that path, as I mentioned, I was starting to see physical fitness deteriorating as I was starting to see weight rise, and those are things I weren't happy with. So everyone I think has heard at some point this like definition of insanity, which is just repeating the same process over and over and expecting a different result. Well, I started to feel like I was on that path where if I didn't come in and make an intervention, then I was bound to kind of, repeat that course of history there. So I bring this up because it was in my early 20s that I tried to really make a decision to change the trajectory of that outcome. And I can now tell you, as someone who has now entered what's called your master's athletic category, that is in your 40s, is it doesn't get easier down the line to start to pivot this train. The healthy habits or the habits in general that you make now in your early 20s going into your 30s, they're going to be so ingrained by the time that you're 40, it's much harder to change. So it's so important to start thinking about these kind of lifestyle decisions right now. So in looping back to my entertainment days a little bit, it was not uncommon at all for me to be out the door by 9 o'clock in the morning and not home again until after midnight. And I would do that 6 days a week, and I would usually have Monday off. And by the time I hit Monday, I not only didn't want to work out or be physical, but I really didn't want to get out of bed whatsoever. But I had made this health and wellness journey a bit of a priority of mine at that point. I was committed, so I was trying to stay consistent. And first and foremost, I know Monday was my only day off, but it was also my day of greatest availability. So I would have to resist that urge to stay in bed all day, and it instead became my longest workout day. So first thing in the morning, it was out the door, getting that most quality workout session in that I wanted for the week so that I could feel good about maximizing that training schedule. And what I found out in hindsight is that getting up and out actually changed the course of my entire day, because it also assured that I was going to have a very productive day, that I had gotten that workout done first thing in the morning. So my instinct to stay in bed was gone. And by being out, I was going to be able to not only do the things that I needed to do for myself in that day, the things we all have to do, the laundry, the bank trips, the et cetera, but I was going to have time and I was going to have availability to do things that I wanted to do for myself, that I thought were very important to kind of, fulfill my own weekday there. I also wanted to be consistent over the rest of the week. That one day wasn't enough, but outside of 9 a.m. to midnight, it doesn't leave a lot of time, as you can imagine. So I just wanted to share a few things that I ultimately tried to make this kind of fitness journey sustainable for me with this unusual schedule. And it started with trying to do 30-minute at-home sessions. And I would do just gentle yoga sessions in my house that were easy, restorative, no equipment necessary, something I could pull from YouTube. I didn't need 60 to 90-minute sessions to accomplish these things. I didn't need expensive gym memberships or studio memberships. What I needed was to consistently dedicate these short periods of times, multiple days out of the week. So just a little FYI on a fitness world, it's going to always be more productive to do, let's say, 5 30-minute sessions than 2 75-minute sessions during the week. And 30 minutes fit a whole lot better into my lifestyle at the time than trying to fit these longer sessions. So I think a lot of times we can get in our own way and create these hurdles to success, but they're just sort of figments of our imagination. And if we start breaking those things down into the things not that you can't do, but the things that you can do, you have access to, you have availability to, it starts to become a lot more, part of a manageable routine. Also started looking at my time allotments, and I realized that I was spending 45 minutes commuting back to work. And I knew in that distance, I really could run the same distance in about 60 minutes. So the way I looked at it, I started running back and forth to work as often as I could. I would take clothes, leave at work. Thankfully, I had a shower available there so I didn't have to go through my workday and my run kit, which would have changed the dynamic a little bit. But I realized that I had taken this time that was historically unproductive for me, made it highly productive for me. Not to mention that it changed my commute from a crowded subway car to watching the sun come up over the Hudson River, which is a little bit of a lifestyle change as well. So while this is not a solution in every circumstance, obviously, I think the goal I was trying to impart here is that if you can kind of look at that schedule and take time that was previously unproductive and make it more productive, you'll ultimately be able to get more out of those days. And the final piece of the pie that I did at that time was I joined a run club to make a commitment to others to start meeting on Saturday mornings. So it was a time I knew it was going to be difficult for me to get up and motivate myself. I kind of enlisted the accountability of others to make sure that I could stay consistent, chase my goals. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a bit. So to loop back, I mentioned needing to take care of yourselves and others in order to be there for others. And I knew that just because my schedule was complicated didn't mean I could give up taking care of myself. And as a matter of fact, I needed that time even more than ever to be able to reset, reflect, recharge, and get ready to go back into work and be able to be there and provide a sympathetic and professional demeanor to the people I was working with. And I must say that the profession you all have chosen is very hard. Outside of the long hours, there are physical demands of being on your feet, having to assist patients, et cetera. I was just having a conversation with a runner of mine the other day. She's a young woman who's pursuing a career in oral surgery. And she talked about the physical difficulties of being kind of hunched over a patient all day, working on teeth, long, multi-hour surgeries, and the physical toll that takes on her body. So we're having to look at that, outside on a fitness scale, on a running scale of how do we, change her program? How do we manipulate her outside of work in order not only to be a great athlete, which she's striving for, but to be able to consistently provide and be in that posture for an extended period of time without, ultimately injuring herself on the job. There are obviously also huge mental and emotional demands and being in a high stakes workplace all the time. This is a tough take on it, but you'll be seeing a lot of people on some of the worst days of their lives out there. Certainly those in the cancer space, as Vaso probably can speak to. So the stakes are huge every single day, and being emotionally available is important. And it's impossible to do for the most part, unless you're taking care of yourself to be able to be ready to be there to handle those other people. And these moments are incredibly taxing on you personally. So it's crucial that you learn how to, as a friend would kind of say to me, he said that you have to learn how to fill your cup so that you can keep showing up there in the service of others. So a little interesting tidbit on stress. So stress, big deal, obviously, but our bodies don't differentiate stress between personal stress, workout stress, professional stress, et cetera. We take it all on the same, and you can see, body chemistry levels like cortisol start to rise as a result of it. So when we think about this, these, workplace stresses are going to come into your personal life, and your personal life stresses are going to come into your workplace life. So it's trying to find the ways to make sure that you're replenishing yourself, filling your cup. That's why I say it's so important to keep to do in order to continue to be able to give back to others. So I want to talk about something that I refer to as the ideal schedule. So every single client that I start with, we talk about the ideal schedule. And I think that this is incredibly important. And in essence, when I refer to the ideal schedule, I mean making time for ultimately what is important for you. And so when I start working with people, we literally pull out their books, whether it's electronic or physical, usually electronic these days. And we start laying things out. Of course, we lay out their work hours. We lay out their commuting hours. We lay out their personal and family obligations. But similarly, we block out time for the things that are important and valuable to them. And not a lot of people are doing this, right? So, not a lot of calendars I look at have like TV time with my spouse, or dinner with my family, or time to pursue the hobbies that I'm interested in pursuing. We spend so much time thinking about the workplace appointments, and then we kind of leave our personal time to chance. But if it's a priority and it's something that you need to be self-fulfilled, you need to put that in the calendar, just in the way that you would block time for anything else, physically in your calendar, and then be very thoughtful about maintaining it. And the reason I find this so important is that we're naturally drawn to what's happening right in front of us at that exact second. There's always going to be some fire to put out. There's always going to be a phone call, a message that comes in, and something that draws immediate attention. And if you had a plan of 30 minutes of going for a walk and enjoying the outside, but a call comes in and takes 15 minutes of that block, that time block is gone, and it's likely that the activity will be also. And that was the activity that you set aside time to do for yourself. Because we know that your work schedule isn't moving. We know that your fixed obligations aren't moving. So ultimately, you've lost that time that you needed to refill your cup. And I will tell you, one of the hardest lessons I learned in my now 25-year professional experience is that the more sacred you are with your own time, the more protective you are with it, the more consistent you'll be, and the more that other people will start to respect that time as well. If someone knows they can access you 24/7, then they will. And if you start to define what's okay, what your parameters are, what your response times are, other people are going to be incredibly respectful of that also. So as I mentioned, I'm a runner. Just a reminder, not everyone else has to be a runner. But when I'm running, I'm unplugged. So it's no phone calls, no text messages. I have very limited time to really be tuned into myself and my attentions. And that's the time that I know, especially over, many years now, that I have to have for myself. Otherwise, my mood is negatively affected. My energy is negatively affected. So therefore, it's relatively precious to me. So I'm going to talk naturally about exercise as a part of an overall healthy lifestyle. So far, we have talked, not so much about exercise kind of by design, a little bit more of how to look at a schedule and make it fit your lifestyle. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with lifespan. So very simply, just how long we live. And, the incredible part about lifespan is over the last 5 decades or so, there's been huge advancements in lifespan thanks to modern medicine, which is amazing. There's also, I think a rapidly emerging field is this longevity space, and where they not only start to talk about lifespan, but they're starting to look at health span. So health span, if anyone's not familiar, just in comparison, is not just how long we live, but how long we live well, being able to do the things that we would like to do later into life. And the interesting thing is that although lifespan is advancing significantly, health span is dragging way, way, way behind. It's not keeping pace with the lifespan advancements. So in essence, we're allowing people to live longer, but ultimately these people end up living with disabilities, chronic disease, et cetera, for on average, almost the final 10 years of their life. So if I offered everyone a great long life, we'd all be thrilled, right? I would. If we threw the caveat in all of a sudden that you're gonna have this long life, but for the final 10 or so years of it, you're really not going to be able to do any of the things you wanted to do, we would think about it a little bit differently. And there's certainly multiple ways of looking at this, but without a doubt, exercise and diet is a huge part of this kind of bridging the gap between lifespan and health span. And so I mentioned the longevity studies. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Dr. Pita Attia, but he is a former oncologist that now has rededicated his life to the study of longevity. And a quote pulled straight from his recent book is, "Exercise is by far the most potent longevity drug. No other intervention does nearly as much to prolong our lifespan and preserve our cognitive and physical function." I'm gonna throw on, now that I'm gonna throw one statistic onto the pod here. And this is what I would talk a lot with adult athletes about. And one more time, just why I'm so pro physical fitness when it comes to this, which is that we all lose power at almost twice the rate we lose strength. So every decade after 40 years old, we'll decline 17% of strength and 10% in power. So in 30 years, so at the age of 70, we'll have lost 30% of our total strength and 51% of our total power without intervention. Those strength and power numbers, they just so happen to be the things that also associate with the activities of daily living, of being able to care for yourself, of take care of yourself longer into life. So the good news is that these things can be mitigated. But as of now, there's no pill for it. This is strictly a result of being physically active and being able to take care of yourself starting now to set up a healthy adulthood. So as I mentioned, I've intentionally stayed clear so far of discussing too much of like exercise only for exercise sake, been much more focused about how to prioritize the time and doing things that make you feel good, because that's a hugely important part of this process. But as I mentioned, ultimately that gap between lifespan and health span, it's going to have a lot to do with the exercise and diet space. And so hopefully in finding that time and prioritizing yourself will also allow the opportunity for you to pick some things that are just generally good for you as well. Because naturally we all want to live longer, but we want to live longer, we want to live better, and we want to be able to do all the exciting things that we like to do deeper into our lives. So you might ask a very reasonable question as well, which is why in the hell am I discussing longevity and aging gracefully with a bunch of students starting their careers? And the answer is to tip back to what I mentioned earlier, is that these lifestyle habits start now. By the time, 2 decades from now, when things start to like settle down, which they never will, by the way, it becomes harder and harder to change the ship. So you want to, take the time, prioritize your health, prioritize your wellness. Now it's going to make it a lot easier to bake that into your everyday routine. So I want to talk about some ways along that line of making this part a sustainable part of your life cycle. So I talked about the ideal schedule. Obviously, it's taking the time to actually schedule it out. I think maybe the other most important part of this is that you have to find something that interests you. So whether it's running, weightlifting, yoga, walking, cycling, etc., hiking, it has to be something that's interesting to you. If it doesn't excite you, I promise you're not going to do it. So it needs to be something you either enjoy or at least interested in learning about or pursuing. I see a lot of this, but don't be afraid to start something new. People, I mentioned previously, kind of will get in their own way out of fear of trying something new, but it's amazing to be a beginner at something. It's when you see the fastest progress, the most growth, and especially in comparison to people training at advanced levels. By the time you get to these advanced levels, especially in sport, you're working your tail off just to try to get, seconds of margin. But being a beginner is an incredibly fun, exciting way to learn about new activities. And because you're a beginner, you're going to be able to celebrate a lot of small victories along the way as you see this rapid progress. So don't be afraid to start something new if it's something that excites you. I'll kind of refer to this next part as creating sticking points, if you will. So I talk a lot about this, especially with people who are trying to develop a healthy relationship with exercise, which is I want you to create things that help you stick with an activity. And some quick ones are, planning workouts with friends, using that in-person accountability. It's a very powerful feeling to have your buddy waiting on a street corner at 7 o'clock in the morning for you. Excuse me. You're very likely to turn up in comparison to just being by yourself, walking out the door on a cold, dark morning. If your friend's there, it's going to really enhance that experience. Corporate accountability programs. We're seeing more movement than ever of corporations and employers coming in and offering incentives to their employees for being physically active, for step counting, for showing at the gym a certain times a month. The reason is that employers are very invested in their employees being healthy and happy and taking the time to do this. Employees hopefully will feel motivated by also getting workplace incentives, sometimes in the form of cash, sometimes in the form of bonuses, et cetera, to be able to do these things as well. I'm a huge fan of clubs and groups as well. So I mentioned my athletic journey in running was in huge part due to the run club that I participated in. My friends at that time weren't doing what I wanted to be doing. I didn't have a lot of friends who are runners. I didn't have a lot of friends who are pursuing the performance goals that I was ultimately interested in. So I was very fortunate to go and seek out people who were doing it. And I'll tell you, especially the way we're interconnected now, someone is out there and sharing your passion. So whether it's virtually, in person, et cetera, the access to finding like-minded people that are going to help and support you is easier than ever. It's a great idea to utilize those things. But the more ways in which you can ultimately connect your exercise life with your social life, with your family life, will become easier and easier to maintain that habit. It's going to make it more enjoyable, more fun. Like I said, kind of increase the stickiness factor there. I want you to set achievable goals often. So we need to set small goals, attainable goals, and keep resetting those goals as you progress. So I mentioned I start my relationship with every client with talking about ideal schedule. The other thing that we do is we start with the goal setting session. That's always what everything starts with. I'll kind of discuss it with them we work from a goal-oriented approach and we work backwards. So tremendously part of my process with athletes. And just a little tidbit, I always bring up with them, but a goal without a plan is only a wish. So we have to be very clear with ourselves sometimes too, to differentiate between a goal and a wish. And in my mind, a goal is a finite goal, something that's quantifiable and has a timeline because we can measure it. So I work a lot with performance goals. I work with athletes on performance goals. They say, I not only want to do this event, but I need to do this event in this amount of time, where I'm in the top 10 females in New York City and I need to be in the top 3 for sponsorship, et cetera, et cetera. So very, very finite goals. But not everything is so finite. And for most of us, myself included, it doesn't have to be so specific. It's where I like to talk about, we can have experience-based goals. So these are some of my favorite athletes I work with, actually. They come in and they don't know exactly what they want to be, but they know how they want to feel, and they know how they want an experience to make them feel. An example I see often is like, I would like to finish this race and I would like to finish it feeling strong, and I would like to have my hands held high at the end. That's an amazing way to look at an experience, which is to relieve the pressure on yourself, focus on the fun factor, and focus on the feeling about that you have during that time. And then, of course, goals don't have to be specific to fitness targets at all, right? They can be entirely experiential. So some people just want to feel stronger. Some people want to be able to do adventures more easily while traveling. People want to be more physical, to be able to keep up with children, nephews, nieces, et cetera. And the point being is that it doesn't necessarily matter what the goal is, but it's important that you have it. It's It's important that it's important to you and resonates with you. And it's important that you're checking in on it and making sure to keep following it. Another big part of this piece of the pie, if you will, I think, is to make reasonable goals. So we're kind of hard on ourselves by nature. And one of the biggest mistakes I see coaching runners is that people do far too much too soon. We're strongly influenced by external pressure. We're strongly influenced by social media influencers, et cetera, that are putting out all sorts of information. And so for new runners, and 9 times out of 10, when I'm coming in and working in a scenario, what I'm actually doing is telling them it's okay to dial back down. It's okay to make things a little bit easier. And it's okay to make things a lot more fun. I'll tell you a pretty quick and effective way to have an awful relationship with exercise is to go out and do the hardest thing you can do immediately. It's going to wipe you out. It's going to be no fun. It's going to take days to bounce back. And by the time you finally do it again, why on earth would you want to? So it's about being okay with dialing it back. Once again, it's okay to be a beginner. It's actually amazing. And just keep the fun factor as part of it. And for more of those experiential goals, we can still have to break those down into small steps. So it's very easy for us all to focus on the destination, right? But ultimately, we need to focus on the segments that got us there. And I remember working with someone many years ago, and she said this thing that has stuck with me now, which is to be very mindful of the journey and not just the destination, meaning we really need to celebrate those small steps along the way. I was having actually dinner with someone last night. We were talking a little bit about the chat here today. And he had an interesting take. So I told him I was going to talk to a big group of forthcoming medical professionals. And he was like, well, that's the perfect group to talk to. And I was like, how do you mean? He was like, well, these people have been training like athletes their whole life. And I was like, please expand. And in essence, he made this great point, which I would love to share with you today, which is that when you come and you say, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a surgeon, these are things that you throw out at 10, 12 years old, like firefighter, professional baseball player. They're things that are very challenging career paths to follow. And they don't happen by accident. So you didn't just like all of a sudden end up in college or med school. That doesn't just like happen to you. You had to be conscious of this starting as a teenager, getting top-notch grades. And then you had to make sure you were in the right advanced placement classes. Then you had to make sure you were moving on to the next level of schooling and pursuing it. You had to take care of yourself. You had to study hard. You had to do these thousands and thousands of hours of work to get here. And that's the exact process that a trained athlete goes for. And why I bring this up is that all of these traits about being consistent, about setting aside the time, about being accountable to yourself, they're all already there. All you need to do is just ever so slightly make sure to open up the time, allow an opportunity for yourself, for your wellness journey, to include options for healthy living. But the backbone, the hardest part of the process, establishing that routine, being consistent, is already all kind of baked into your DNA. So to recap here a little bit, the tips for just including healthy activities into the routine are: 1, finding something you're super excited about. If it's something you're excited about, it's going to get you out of bed. It's going to allow you to keep chasing it. It's going to allow you to keep, showing up time after time. It's dedicate the time and the calendar to it. It's easier said than done, but literally sitting down on a weekly basis and charting out not only all the obligations, but the things that you need to do, the things that you have to do, and ultimately the things that you want to do and want to prioritize in your own life. I promise you, it will change the way that your kind of off time is. Create the sticking points by creating accountability for yourself, looping in friends, looping in families, seeking out groups, seeking out different people who are going to help you kind of maintain this routine that you establish for yourself. Making small and accomplishable goals that you update often. And most importantly, which we haven't talked a ton about, is you have to have fun with it. The whole part is just having fun, doing something that's good for yourself, moving your body, and so have fun with every step of it. And so to button things up here a little bit, we'll move on to some questions. You may have noticed we haven't discussed a single specific workout, a certain amount of time that you need to do any particular one thing. The most important things that I tend to see within healthy individuals in general is that they've found a way to incorporate fitness into their life. They've found something that they enjoy and value and spend time doing. They've found a way to incorporate friends, family, and loved ones into their routine and found a way to prioritize themselves in the midst of a busy schedule. And if anything comes out of today, I certainly hope that this is a way, and some of the information we've discussed here will allow you to kickstart kind of a process to pursue healthy choices along the course of your own journey here. But otherwise, I think we can probably open it up to some questions. It's all right.
Thank you so much, Coach. Really appreciate all of that. If anybody wants to throw anything into the chat box, please do so now. I also put a link in for our typical survey, if you can complete that and send our way back today.
Well,
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions are coming in. Just to comment myself. First of all, just appreciate Coach Ferry coming in. This is wonderful. You know, this whole physician wellness series that we have is a national thing. It's requiring all through training, and part of it is you know, we have to be in our game. We're a motivated group, but sometimes we don't take care of ourselves real well. And I think you know, sharing some of these insights is important. Also, patients are asking us for advice, and having content experts like yourself going through it helps. And I can say, as an ex-wrestler and a guy who's been running for about I have to say 50 years now, you know, it's you know, it's kept my sanity through things too. And I think we have to find those balance, and we really are prioritizing for all the third and fourth years. You know, we have regional dean meetings one-to-one, and one of the questions we ask is about life balance, and it's important because we're helping other people doing it too. So I'll see if there's, but so thank you so much. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
I did, one person made a comment here. They like the idea of dialing back consistency. I think that is, sometimes I think we're kind of a group that the only gear we have is fifth. And sometimes third is okay.
Yeah, and sometimes it's first, to be quite honest. It's you know, it's something we see all the time. You know I kind of mentioned while chatting that I think we as a group of people, you know, and the more ambitious you are, it can start to exacerbate itself a little bit, that we're hard on ourselves. We expect these huge things, especially for people like, you know, I mentioned these like thousands of hours of study, always being top of your class, top of your field. You kind of expect that to translate into every single aspect of your life, but it doesn't always work exactly like that, right? Like you have to be okay with like being new, with like allowing yourself to learn, allowing yourself to kind of, you know, tiptoe into a new trade, a new field. And there's a lot of fun that can go along with that. But yes, it's hard to like give ourselves a little bit of a pass and some leniency. So as I mentioned, a lot of the times, the first thing I do, it's not only do I come in and tell people that I'd like them to kind of dial back a little bit, but they almost need like the permission to do so sometimes. If like, I just, you know, I need you to dial back, I need you to do a little bit less and ultimately be more productive. So it happens at just all levels.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see if there's.
Hi, I had a question.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, when you're working with your clients, how much emphasis do you have on sleep on their schedule? And do you sometimes say like maybe it's better to wake up early and get the workout done rather than getting like enough sleep? Like I also have like a hard time balancing like sleep and just being like productive.
Yeah, it's a great question. Tons of new like sleep research coming out in the last years. Also with like the activity tracker, like boom in the market in terms of balancing, you know, sleep versus activity and monitoring resting heart, you know, blah, 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 blah. It's very important. It's very important. And ultimately the answer is always like, it depends a little bit. And, you know, you have to kind of take a look at, you know, what those hours are, what your sleep availability is and what the exercise. And, you know, when I mentioned like, it depends, you know, you just can't replace sleep. Like you have to have a certain amount of it. So it's, you know, where can you pull some time potentially out elsewhere? And, you know, as I kind of mentioned with the smaller session, it's like, yeah, is it hard to fit an hour into a really busy day? It is hard to fit an hour, but like, do you have could it be 15 minutes? Could it be 20 minutes? Like, could it be 30? And ultimately, that's why I'm such a big fan of literally putting it on a calendar where, if I look at it and say like, all right, like I've got a 6 a.m. workout, which I know I need 8 hours sleep, or you all are young. My wife still says she sleeps like a college student. So she likes like 9 to 10 hours sleep, if at all possible. But sometimes that reverse engineering really helps. So if you look and say like, all right, I need 6 to 6:30 as my workout. I need to be awake at 5:45. You can back that up and kind of know like it means I need like a bedtime at this point. But I was talking not so long ago to a sports nutritionist, and we were talking about these recovery scores that come out through wearable devices now, like the Apple Watch or Garmin's. And I was like, what happens when you wake up and you have this recovery score that's like 22 out of 100 scale, just in case. And she's like, well, in essence, you can't necessarily like change your whole day ahead, right? Like you don't have another, like pro athletes can just be like, well, I'm gonna go back to bed and I'm gonna do this workout in the afternoon, because all they have to do all day long. Like, but for most of us, it's like we're waking up, we have this like maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour, like devoted to doing that workout. And the way that she kind of recommended I look at those numbers, and this is what I now like kind of pass on to my clients. It's like, okay, I still need to get my session done right now. This is my only availability. So I'm going to get my session done right now. And now when I think about tonight, it's how can I set myself up this evening to all of a sudden get the rest and recovery I need for the next day, so that I don't keep exacerbating the same thing over and over again. So it's not exactly a clear-cut answer, but to try to answer it, the sleep part of it is super important. I think it's great to track and monitor the way that we would with anything else. And I think you try to like do the best you can to balance it out and make sure you're getting the rest and the recovery you need, but also setting the time aside to like get those sessions in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We got a couple comments. I think it rather piggybacks off of this as well. I'll read them off to you. As medical students, our schedules are constantly changing and evolving, even hour to hour sometimes. How do we maintain that consistency when making a schedule ahead of time is almost impossible? And the follow-up to that was a student.
Or do you only see her on that special?
A student added that more often than not, our rotations.
Lauren, your speaker's open.
And rotations are scheduled to be 12 plus hours a day. Add to that the hours of daily studying just to prepare for our shelves and boards. There isn't enough time to get 8 hours of sleep, let alone taking time to be relaxed.
Yeah, totally. No, two great points. And I'll start with the first one. It's why, I spend, usually when I talk about my athletic time, I spend so much time talking about my entertainment days, because they were so long and so difficult. And things, it evolved all the time. And so I think the answer is, to be honest, it's like you do the best you can. You try to make your plan, you try to stick to it as close as possible. And obviously when you get a wrench that gets thrown in the system, things change. And, certainly athletes that I look at, like every week we're making some sort of manipulation to the schedule. The amount of athletes, I coached maybe 50 athletes one-on-one, and I said on a group space, like over 1,000. Maybe 1 out of 50 because the workout week exactly as planned going into it, but you do the best you can. And sometimes I'll say to them, because people will beat themselves up about missing a session as well. It's like, hey, all those good days of consistency buy a little inconsistency. Outside of that as well, especially with athletes training for a specific goal, we'll look at the week and I'll say like, hey, like not every single day is prioritized the same way. Like if we have 6 days of workouts across the scope of a week, 3 are going to be really our important workouts. 2 are going to be pretty nice. And 1 is going to be like our cherry on top here. So if you can prioritize these 3 days and make sure no matter what happens, that these 3 days get in. And then if you have extra time, we're going to prioritize these 2 days and then these 1 days, because inevitably something's going to come up. And so you just have to be lenient with yourself, make sure you give yourself a little bit of a pass, allow yourself to manipulate it. But then there's the flip side, which is to not be so lenient that it never happens.
Yeah, and maybe just a practical thing, someone, a runner likes to do things is, when I got busy on inpatient services, I just knew I couldn't keep up with that, but I'd make the point that I was going to walk everywhere. I wasn't taking elevators anywhere in the hospital and doing it. And I mean, sure, that's what you do, because you're right. Our schedules are unpredictable. I did OB for 15 years. I didn't know when I'd be up all night and doing things, but you just take advantage of the moments you have and the best you can do it. And sometimes, it's nothing. And I saw one person had something about, can you use a prescription for gym membership, HSA, FSA. You have to look at plans that do that. Some of them do that. So a lot of the employers do put in things that have added benefit for people, because in the long run, that's a health benefit. They're going to cost less than the health system if they're healthy. Yeah. Coach Ferry's right. It is the exercise of the one instigator that does have a huge impact on things and can turn things around. So.
And I wanted to touch on, because I think someone mentioned like a call schedule as well. Which one? You all keep the worst hours of any profession I've ever seen. It's
we're bad.
It's the craziest schedule I've ever come across. But it makes me think of, I worked with a kidney doctor down in Texas, and every single week, we had to go through and we would have to look at her schedule, and we had pinned weeks ahead of time when her call was and when it wasn't. And I knew that if she had worked a 24-hour shift, I better not be asking her to do a really hard workout the next day. She was going to, in essence, be a zombie. I might have her get up in the afternoon, spend 30 minutes of walking, but that was not going to be the day for that week. So, kind of going back to the constantly evolving, constantly shifting all over the place schedule, that was that. I mean, her phone could have rung any night, in the middle of the night, and she was off and away. So we were always reassessing, but we always had our plan going in. And you have to know, like, it absolutely had to do with, like, all right, you're in the hospital for 36 hours straight. You're a zombie for the next 24 hours. So that means the next day, where you should be have your most availability, that's where we're going to set your key session of the week. And then over the weekend, where you might have a little bit more availability, that's going to be the second key session over the course of the week. So nothing's ever perfect. Like, even in my own, I have more flexibility than most people I know, and I never have a perfect schedule across the scope of the week. I'll admit that. It's always kind of making these little adjustments, but trying to, like, make sure that, I'll sometimes just say the trains run on schedule. It's like something's always going to be 5 minutes forward, 5 minutes backwards, but ultimately we need all the trains to run on schedule. You do it more often than not, you put yourself in a good position to be successful.
Kind of following up with you, Coach, I think, as you said earlier, it's the consistency and the building of habits. Just that time of building up and starting somewhere and seeing it through, because once those habits become established, it really becomes a part of your life. And yeah, it's always going to be something, a schedule, kids, whatever your life looks like, there's always going to be something to get in the way. It's just, how do you manage it and plow through it? I feel like that's life. I personally trying to teach that to my 3 kids right now. So, there's always going to be something. We don't get by unscathed. So, anything else, anybody to add? Really appreciate everyone's time. Exercise need not be strenuous or hard to affect the health benefits. It's a question.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's 100% right. So, I think I mentioned kind of some longevity specialists there, and there are 2 things they're really looking. If you threw out everything except 2 things on an energy zone scale that affects longevity, it's aerobic training, which is like the easiest lower heart rate zone, and then it'd be VO2 max, which is higher. It's like kind of high intensity training, if you will. But no, it absolutely does not need to be strenuous. You mentioned health benefits in general. You do a quick Google about just like simply being outside for 30 minutes a day, or being near nature. There are huge benefits that go along with that. So more than anything, it's moving your body, taking the time for yourself, all the way back to, like, if you can do some study on breath work and the powerful benefit of breath work. I mean, you talk about the least strenuous you could possibly do, but it has some huge, like, cognitive and behavioral significance as well there. So it doesn't need to be hard.
That'd be great. If the group is kind enough to fill out the survey, that would be great. But again, thank you so much. Ambassador bringing together and Coach John Ferry. This was very helpful. I think we got good feedback on that and very relevant for all of us. And we appreciate that. We all need to be coached a little bit once in a while to help us all. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, everybody.